Very happy to bring in my next guest, Jay Privman, Hall of Famer. Jay Privman, whose work we've all read and admired for years in the pages of Daily Racing Form, seen his work on network TV. And Jay, is it safe to say after your adventures on social media yesterday that you're not going to be attending the Taylor Swift Kelce wedding coming up imminently?
No, I'm hoping I'll get an invite. No, I have no animosity towards Jason Kelce for our celebrated. I guess it was celebrated or back and forth yesterday. I thought his responses were acknowledged. What I was trying to get at. I think a lot of people on Twitter didn't quite understand what I was trying to get at, and that's I think why you reached out to me. But I admire the guy. I mean, the guy was a Hall of Fame football player. He's now going on into the media. He and his brother, to me, look like they'd be cool guys to hang with. I just thought what he did yesterday was out of bounds, and I wanted to kind of, in a sort of mocking way, show him why I thought it was out of bounds. And thank you for putting up on the screen here. This is the thing I really want to illustrate. So his initial tweet regarding Secretariat, I thought was inappropriate because it just has no basis in fact. And so my way of sort of trying to show him, hey, look, don't put out something that has no basis in fact. It's really an unfair thing to do, was to take the template of what he wrote and overlay with the exact same words my stuff, but putting it on him. Like, here's something that somebody could say about you that has absolutely no basis in fact. So hopefully this will resonate with you. And that was why, as you can see, I've kind of used the exact same language he did with, but just putting it on him as where he puts it on Secretariat. So that was the point of it. And I thought, oh, this is kind of a fun, clever way to get a point across about media responsibility for somebody who's now in the media and is, I think, going to end up having a pretty long career in media. From all indications, he's going to have, a lot of work coming this fall. He's already got the podcast, obviously, with his brother. But it seemed like he took it well from the response I got from him. And there were a lot of people on Twitter, Pete, who seemed to completely understand where I was going with this. But as often happens in social media, there were plenty who did not want to take the time to look at it and sit with it. But we're like, how could you be such a callous, awful person and say he's brain damaged, which is clearly, if you look at what's here, not what I was doing.
For those that didn't see the original Kelce tweet, just going to put this out there. You know who else has enlarged hearts? People who take copious amounts of steroids. I'll admit, I don't know whether Secretariat was on steroids or not. It's impossible to know because in 1973, when Secretariat won the Triple Crown, there was not steroid testing, etc. Jay's tweet mimicking the language, just to put this out there. You know who else makes unsubstantiated claims not backed up by facts? People suffering from CTE. I admit I don't know whether Jason Kelce suffers from CTE. It's impossible to know. I mean, it was pretty clear. The parody, I think, was pretty clear. And it was interesting, though, that Jason came back not getting angry, but actually, interestingly, acknowledging the very possibility you were joking about. I mean, it was a wild and interesting exchange for sure. And the place I want to start with this, what is a popular person on Twitter's responsibility to journalistic ethos? Is Twitter more people standing around at some sort of weird water cooler that the whole world can be invited to, or is it a place where journalistic standards are required in your view? I just wanted to ask you that general question as a starting point.
I think it can be both. I think it just depends on the topic and what you're talking about. If you're just if you're just offering an opinion, like, I think the Eagles are better than the Chiefs. Okay, that's an opinion. But what he put out there, to me, crossed the line of an unsubstantiated claim. There's no basis in fact for what he did. And I also, one of the reasons I responded to it is because he's now a member of the media. And I think, to your point, Pete, when you are a member of the media, you have a responsibility to be accurate and fair. And I thought what he did was neither of those. It was neither accurate nor fair. And I wanted to, what I was hoping to do what I was hoping was a clever way, point out to him, look how unfair this is. I'm saying something that is completely out of bounds and over the top regarding you. Get it? Because what you did is the equivalent of that. And I think based on his response, he got that. Others, however, appeared not to.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I like how you frame that, especially making that point about him being held to a different standard, not just because of his popularity, but because this is now his profession. So this is something that actually, could be helpful to him. And I think rather than looking to dunk on him, it did almost feel like you were pointing something out that would actually be useful in his career. I mean, is it fair to say that that was a piece of your motivation there?
Absolutely. I was just hoping it would resonate with him of like, oh, okay, I see what he's getting at here. Maybe I went a little too far. And I mean, I thought he took it well. You saw some of the responses he had, not only to myself, but to other people saying, yeah, maybe I went too far. Hopefully it's a learning lesson. I don't want anybody to think that I'm wishing or hoping that he has anything bad going on. I don't think he has anything bad going on. I have no proof he has anything bad going on. And there was nothing in that tweet that was, in my mind, saying that. It was just, I wanted to use the template of what he had regarding Secretariat to point out, boy, look how unfair it would be for somebody to say something about you that has absolutely no basis in fact.
You're a historian of the game. I love your book about the Breeders' Cup. I know you know Derby history inside and out, having covered the whole Triple Crown for Daily Racing Form for many, many moons. I mean, you've said it already that it has no basis in fact, but from what you know of history and steroids and horses at the time, I mean, is this even something that there's any work on? Is there any? What do we know about what was going on back then? Just sort of out of curiosity as much as anything else.
Well, I don't know writ large regarding the sport then. What I do know, though, and that something that is factually known, is that there was an autopsy done on Secretariat afterwards. There was published data by the veterinarian who did the autopsy, and he said that it was just an enlarged heart, but a naturally enlarged heart, and there was nothing untoward regarding the pathology. I mean, you can look all that up. In fact, Bill Knack wrote about it, and Bill Knack, who was the greatest chronicler of Secretariat, wrote about it when it happened, that it was a Secretariat had a large heart, but everything was normal in terms of its proportions. It was just a large heart, and that probably was what gave him the lung capacity and the endurance to do what he did. But there was zero evidence that anything untoward had gone on with the horse. And I think to make, an unsubstantiated claim about that 50 years on kind of impugns the integrity of the people who were associated with the horse back then, all of whom are gone and can't defend themselves. So that's another aspect of this that I just think is grossly unfair to even bring it up.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair comment. The Knack book is one of the greats. I must admit that I did have the thought, as much as I miss Bill, who I got the chance to meet a couple of times, and his writing, I did have the thought, perhaps it's just as well he didn't live to have to deal with this particular comment. Some of why this blew up the way it did, doubtless, I've got my slew shirt on. Some of this blew up though because of it even the pantheon that they're in as Triple Crown winners. The Secretariat holds a very special place in people's hearts, and I think that's got to be some reason why it became the firestorm that it did. That it was basically like Mr. Kelce going into church and dropping his pants because of the special place Secretariat holds in so many of our hearts. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Probably. I mean, you'd have to ask other people, why they responded the way they did. I can only speak for myself. And I just outlined the reasons I responded the way I did. Regarding Secretariat, though, I will tell you one anecdote. When he was winning the Triple Crown, I was a teenager. I was only 13 years old then. And, being an unsophisticated fan at the time, I hated Secretariat back then because he was beating up on my favorite horse back then, which was Sham. It wasn't until later when I came to appreciate what Secretariat was and had accomplished. But my, teenage 13-year-old person at that time just was, angry that Secretariat was beating my favorite horse.
I'll show you where I stand on the subject there. This was a Father's Day gift from last year. We've got the gold briar of Secretariat, so maybe that's my bias coming through with that last observation. While I have you, I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't talk about industry stuff as well as we sometimes do. Quite specifically, the performance of the stewards on Kentucky Derby Day. And rather than me opine on this, I'll just ask you this question. What grade would you give the stewards' performance in this year's Kentucky Derby?
F. Because it was a failure, which is what F stands for when you're grading things. There's just no excuse not to post the inquiry sign, let alone take down Sierra Leone for what he did in the stretch run with Forever Young. But, it starts with just putting up the inquiry sign. Show people, yes, we saw it. We're looking at it. We know that there's millions bet on this race. There's millions watching this race. And yes, we saw it. We're going to let you know we're going to take a look at it. So they did none of that, obviously. They didn't post the inquiry sign. They claimed 42 hours later in a statement put out by the Racing Commission that they had reviewed the race, but that's not the same thing as an in time putting up the inquiry sign. I thought Frank Angst in the Blood Horse wrote an on-point editorial regarding that specific issue. He was dead on it. So that, to me, Pete, was the first failure. And then there was an incredible amount of money that was impacted by their lack of action. I think any reasonable person who looks at that stretch run would come to the conclusion that Sierra Leone cost Forever Young second place. And if you reverse those positions, it changes the exacta for sure. It changes the order of the trifecta and superfecta, et cetera. If you've got a place bet on Forever Young, it changes that as well. So there's all kinds of things that were impacted by their lack of action. So I thought they failed in terms of posting the inquiry sign. And they also failed, of course, in not taking action that I think was appropriate in that specific instance regarding that stretch run.
Little to add, just incredibly well put. And, for me, it led to frustration, not so much from a gambling point of view, but just as a racing fan point of view. I feel like, Jay, how many of these big days have we had to have conversations like this afterwards? What hope or help is there in terms of racing being able to get out of its own way and let just the stars, and boy, there were stars and excitement on Derby Day. And gosh, I'll be honest, I love this renovation. It was a very positive experience, but I still felt, and this is not me talking through my pocket because it didn't matter in that regard, but I still felt at the end of the day like we didn't show ourselves in the best light as a sport again. What, if any, solutions are there to this and other things along these lines that we've talked about on podcasts after big days so often the last several years?
So I'll address that in a quick second. I do want to say, Pete, that one of the unfortunate things about what you just brought up and what you and I are talking about is that it's taken away from an incredible historical achievement last weekend by trainer Kenny McPeak and jockey Brian Hernandez Jr. to win both the Oaks and the Derby. The first time a jockey had done it in, I think, 15 years. The first time a trainer had done it in almost 75 years. And it had been almost the exact same timeline for a trainer and jockey together to win both races. Those are incredible achievements. And unfortunately, the aftermath of the Derby in terms of the stewards' lack of action, I think, took away a little bit from that. And I hope we can sort of start, as we now are going to turn the page and head on towards the Preakness, I hope we can really focus in on, hey, can Mystik Dan do it again and stay alive for a Triple Crown bid, and focus on the accomplishments of Kenny McPeak and Brian Hernandez. Now, to your question, what can we do? I don't know. Honestly, Pete, I think the officiating in this country is horrendous. We saw a phantom takedown at Naira earlier this year in a stake race. We've seen it twice now in the last few years in the Derby, where the stewards needed, in the case of maximum security, it had to be jockeys filing a claim for them to look at, what everybody saw was an obvious incident that needed at least to be reviewed, let alone take action on it. And they didn't take action this past Saturday owing to the situation. I think if the Japanese rider had claimed fouled, then they'd have looked at it. But it should not be on the jockeys to claim foul. They're coming back to the same locker room as their other riders. The stewards are above all that, literally and figuratively. They're the ones who need to initiate these things and not passively sit back, especially when it's something that's so obvious that we all saw in both the maximum security Derby and this one the other day. And then, speaking larger about issues on big days with racing officials, there was a whole Modern Games fiasco at Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup a few years ago too. So we have these big days and officials who just seem incapable or unwilling or unable to do their job properly. And I'd really like to see just a better quality of officiating and a better understanding of communicating with the public that, yes, we're doing our job. And that was a major failure on Derby Day last weekend.
Just brainstorming here, but is this something that you could possibly see an organization like HISA trying to get involved in? I mean, I think about, and gosh, they still make mistakes too, but I think about the way that MLB handles their replays now, with everything going to a central office where you could have your absolute best people potentially with the right camera setup, looking at these things, making decisions, trying to take it out of the hands of some of these smaller committees. Is there any mechanism for that to happen anytime ever in horse racing?
Well, I think we've already got accreditation that goes on regarding the stewards nationally. And so there is that already. Maybe it needs to go to HISA as well. I just would like to see the racing commissions and the stewards held to more accountability, and for people to have, trainers get dinged and jockeys get dinged for when they do something wrong. I rarely see that happen with stewards. Now, we've seen in the case of in New York, two of the three organizations that put stewards in the booth have made changes in the last year. It seems that there was an acknowledgement that things needed to change there. Regretfully, to this point, the steward who seems to be the one who rules the roost there and seems to be the one who causes most of the problems, at least from what we can tell from afar, is still in position there. And, until situations like that change, and until stewards in Kentucky, now twice with the same people in recent years, just swallowing the whistle, that needs to change. And if HISA needs to come in and add that to their list of things to do, maybe that would help. I would just like to see a better quality of officiating, and I hope we can get to it, because it's not up to standard now. It's just not. You watch races every day in this country, and you can't be, I think, confident that the competency of stewards nationwide is on the level of when, Keen Dangerfield and Pete Pedersen ruled the roost. There are very good stewards in many places, but on the whole, I think we have a problem in this country with the quality of officiating.
Let's end on a different note, on a more optimistic looking forward note. You posed the question before that what we should be talking about is, can Mystik Dan keep this run going? What's your gut? How serious of a contender is he in the Preakness Stakes? Can he hold off Muth and all the rest?
Yeah, well, obviously Muth beat him in the Arkansas Derby, and Mystik Dan's going to be coming back in 2 weeks. So that on paper would seem to favor Muth, but I think Mystik Dan has been overlooked quite a bit through his career. He's run big figures a couple of times now. He makes good trips. Brian Hernandez gives him good trips. You know, the mile and 3/16 of the Preakness should be absolutely fine for him. So I would certainly not discount his chances. I think he's a quality colt, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he performs as he goes forward in the Preakness.
It's going to be fun to check it out. Jay, we appreciate you this time and every time you come on these airwaves. We'll see. Maybe you'll get that invitation to the wedding yet. In any case, we'll be talking soon.
Regardless, Pete, you know, if anybody has a problem with what I did, just know I'm going to shake it off.
Very nice. I see what you did there.